everybody, it's Sara Humphreys here, and on my episode today of Story Behind the Story, I'll be telling you a little bit about behind the scenes of Tall, Dark, and Vampire, which is book one in my Dead in the City series, or my Vampires in New York. It's kind of like Sex in the City, but with vampires, because it's about a coven of vampire chicks in Manhattan. I actually came up with this idea for the series a few years ago, before or around the same time that I came up with the idea for the Amavale legend for my shifters. But at that time, Twilight was at like the height of its craziness and popularity. So I thought I probably should hold off on trying to sell my vampire series because I thought shifters were a little bit different. At least they weren't like at the height of crazy popularity. So I'd probably have a better shot with that. So I did. I held on to my vampires. And what I did do was I introduced the head of this all-female coven is Olivia Hollingsworth. She's a 300-year-old celibate vampire, and she runs a nightclub in New York City called The Coven. She runs it out of an old church in Greenwich Village, kind of a la The Limelight, if any of you remember that place back in the day. But you meet Olivia in the novel Undone, which is kind of a crossover book because it introduces my vampires and it introduces my demons, so I'll tell you about another day. So one more tidbit about Tall, Dark, and Vampire. The heroine, Olivia Hollingsworth. Hollingsworth is a family name. I've said before, I very often use family names, but it was my grandmother's maiden name, Amy Hollingsworth, Robertson Hollingsworth Tawney. She went by Amy R.H. Tawney professionally. She was a pretty amazing lady, God rest her. But so I used Hollingsworth, and she thought that was pretty funny and kind of neat. And a funny story about Mimi is I had given her one of my books to read. And I went to visit her one day. She had actually been in the hospital, and I'd forgotten that she had the book. And I was getting ready to go, and she said, "Well, dear, I read your book." And I said, "Oh, you did?" And I kind of was a little nervous because, there's sex, and it's my grandmother. So I said, "Oh, what'd you think?" She said, "Well, it's very spicy." I said, "Well, yeah, it's a little saucy." And she smirked at me, and she said, "That Will, he really must be something." Oh, my God. My grandmother totally just commented on my sex life. Shoot me now. I was so embarrassed. I must have turned 15 shades of red. But let me tell you something. If anybody would know about good sex, it's a woman who had 8 kids. So, what can I say? Anyway, I thought I'd share that little tidbit with you about Amy Hollingsworth, who was not a vampire, but was an amazing woman and my grandmother. But yes, I did use her name. So I hope you'll check out my Vampires in New York. Tall, Dark, and Vampire is the first. The fourth novel in the series is coming out in January, which is The Good, the Bad, and the Vampire. So that's it, guys. I'll see you next time on The Story Behind the Story.